So now we have our line terminator placed back into the loop where we want it, and you can see it looks like a pretty decent splice. But we have the most important part of the splice to do yet, and that is the bury, and that is the portion of the splice that gives all the strength to the splice. Now a couple things here. Again, make sure you have a nice taper. Dux is so stiff that what you're going to be able to do is push it through the line instead of having to connect it to a FID and pull it through like you do on a lot of softer braids. So we're going to do that. That's going to make it a little bit easier. The first thing that we're going to want to do is follow this out to the end and mark where we need to bring our FID out, and you'll see what I mean in a second. Now what I do for 7mm line, I want to take that out to about, mark it about 5 inches beyond the end of the line itself. So what we're going to do is make a rough mark about 5 inches on the line. Now that's going to tell us where to exit with the FID once we put the FID through the main portion of the line to do the bury. So what we're going to do now is take this line, bend it back, and what I want to do is open up the braid here, and first I want to put a mark on here about 1/4 of an inch away from the end as I pull that back, and that's going to be the point at which I insert the bury portion of the line. So now I'm ready to insert the FID and open up this. What I want to do is open up this braid so I can insert the other line and form our bury section. So I'm going to take the line where the mark is, and I'm going to again loosen up the weave like I've done before. I'm going to take my smaller FID, place it in the line at the mark, and you can see I've started it, and I'm just going to take my time and push it through the center of the line up to the mark. Now one of the things I'm going to have to do here is, because the mark is quite a ways down and my FID isn't long enough, I'm going to have to insert the FID part way and open up the rest of the line, and you can see how I'm doing that. Okay, now I'm going to bring that down to where my mark is, and then I'm going to exit the FID at that mark. And one of the things you got to be careful of is not bifurcating, for lack of a better word, the strands, because it's relatively easy to do, especially on the larger diameters of the line when the strands get so big, and it will cause you problems if you try to push the line through the center of a strand. So you just want to be careful. You know, it's an ounce of prevention thing, really. So if you make sure you're in between the strands and not through the strands, it's going to cause you a lot less problems later on. So now what I'm going to do, I've ran the smaller FID all the way through the line up to the exit point. I'm going to take this 3/8 FID, again, which is perfect for 7mm line, and I'm going to run that through the same section. Now what I want to do is be careful to the points where I inserted the FID halfway through. I want to straighten that line out, and you can see as I put this big FID through it, that's exactly what I did. So I'm just going to keep pushing this through until I get to the end. Sometimes you need to just take your time and work it through like that, and you can see I've pushed it through to the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is pull the FID out, and a couple of tricks. Before I pull it out all the way, I'm going to pull on this FID in this direction and open up that hole a little bit, and that's going to help me later on when I go to push the end of the line through it. Now I'm going to go down to this other end and do the same thing. I'm going to push the FID into the exit point, and then I'm just going to pull on this gently a little bit and open up that hole. Now comes the fun part, where you can really appreciate doing this with Dux, because you take the tapered end and slide it into the hole you just made, and you push it through the opened up section of the line, and you can see how easy it is to push it through. And I'm slowly working the braid down and pushing the inside section out the exit hole, and you can see how easy that was. Okay, so now another trick you want to do is grab a hold of the core, the section that you just pushed through the inside of the other line, and pull this down tight. And you can see what that does. That pulls this end of the line inside to the line, which is where you want it. It's going to end up. Now if I take some time here to pull on it, this is going to end up fitting nice and snug in there. Now when we pre-tension the line after we get the braid done and we stretch these out, that's going to have a really, really nice tight fit on there, and you can see that's the beginnings of a really nice looking locking Brummel splice. Okay, so now what we want to do, that we've pulled this back out, what we want to do is slide the cover back down the core again, because we want to do our taper, which is the final part of the splice. So what I do is I pull this sheave down, the outer section down, to expose as much of the inner berry portion as I can. Now for 7mm, we want to have a 9-inch taper. So what we're going to do is mark this line every 3/4 of an inch, because there's 12 strands, down to 9 inches, and then cut a strand every inch. So what I'm going to do is take the tape measure, hold the line as straight as possible, and I'm basically going to mark the line every 3/4 of an inch till I get to the 9-inch mark. So you can see, counting the end, I have 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 marks, or 11 marks, but 12, I'll have 12 strand end locations. So you'll end up with 11 marks on the line, and then the last one will be this end, so you don't have to mark it for that. Now one of the tricks here is to take every mark and mark it so it's halfway around the line. And that is because you're going to start pulling out strands, and I'll show you here in a second, and you want to have to make sure that you have enough marks. Now if you mark the line halfway around, then you're going to get a mark on every line the way this 12 strand is braided, which is going to work for you. Sometimes one mark gets lost, or maybe 2 marks get lost, but it's not till you get to the end, and then it's relatively easy to see where your 3/4 inch mark is. So now what we're going to do, you can see we have our line marked the way we want it. What we're going to do is take the line in our hands, and I'm going to loosen up the braid so that I can pull out a strand every 3/4 of an inch before I cut it. Now it's important to pull each strand out, otherwise you're not going to know where to cut the other strands. So what you want to do is take this first mark, take a small fid, and pull this out. Now sometimes you need to work on this. You can see it's a little bit of effort involved, but it's not too big, and you loosen up the weave beforehand. So now I'm going to pull the next one out at the mark that I just made, and I'm going to do that for every strand. Just pick the mark, do that for all 12 strands, 12 strands, where I need to cut the strand. Okay, now that we have all the strands marked and pulled out of the line, you want to take a knife and cut the inside strand, cut each one at the mark. So you can see that's what I'm doing. And one of the tough things about Dux is the fact that it is very tough to cut. And you can see this is a very, very sharp knife, and I'm still having to saw through the line. That's basically what you need to do. What works nice is a very, very fine serrated knife, or at least a very, very sharp knife like this ceramic knife. So I'm pulling each strand, and I'm going to cut each strand at the mark. And you can see how that's producing a cut strand every 3/4 of an inch, which is exactly what we want to do. In a consistent fashion every 3/4 of an inch, the more consistent your end links are going to be when you splice. So this is probably the most important part about splicing, is cutting the links and getting the berry portion correct, and then cutting the strands correctly and in a uniform fashion.